Hello and welcome back to linuxjobber.com, where we prepare you for Linux jobs. My own name is Shonmi Joseph and I'll be preparing you for Linux jobs today. My email is showpopulos@gmail.com, so if you have any questions, please feel free to send them to me. Let's quickly go to today's lab. In today's lab, we will be looking at one of the very important parts of Linux administration, which is what you call the DNS, domain name service. So now I don't know why the system is slow today, but we will go to um, the website linuxjabber.com. We go to tutorials and we go to proficiency um, in Linux. So this is the proficiency lecture, and then we go to the labs for proficiency lecture for DNS. So this will be lab 6. I'm going to enter into lab 106 right now. So this is lab 106. So now when I get into lab 106, I'm going to be doing the part A of this lab. It says to connect to your admin server. And here's what I am doing. If you look at my setup right here, I have a server called admin, and you should already have one that you created from previous labs. So am I going to connect to that lab now? Yes, I am. And here is I connected to the lab, and as you can see, my username is Shopopoulos up there, and I switched to root. So now, next, I'm going to let me show you the name of the server so that you can see that I am actually connected to the admin server. Look at it up here. You can see that I am connected to this admin server, and all I just did was I brought up a terminal on there, and this is running on my ESXi machine. So now I go back to the question, and it says in any network, IP to name resolution is very important. You will now use your DNS server to resolve domain names. So now go to the Proficiency Lab 118 and follow the instructions to set up your DNS server. Let me quickly explain to you what DNS server is, and we will go to the DNS lab, which is lab 118, to set this up. But first, let me explain a little bit of it to you so you understand. So now, imagine you are me now, right? So your name is Joseph. This is Joseph right here, right? And you have two friends. One of them is Jane and the other one is Kim. And you need to call your friends. You don't ever remember your friends' names, do you? No. No one remembers their friends' phone numbers. I said names, I'm sorry. No one remembers their friends' phone numbers. All we do is remember our friends' names, right? So now, the phone, we expect our phones to remember our friends' phone numbers. That's what we all do. The same thing works with DNS, right? DNS will remember the IP addresses. All we remember is the name. If you are having problems understanding the full DNS, I have made several videos explaining the DNS in details, and you can go back and look at these videos. But for here, we will be concentrating on the configuration. So in this particular lab, we will be concentrating on the configuration of the DNS. So again, let's go over it quickly. You have your friends' names, but you don't remember their phone numbers. You want your phone to remember their phone numbers. The same thing the DNS server does. It remembers the IPs while we remember the domain names like google.com and yahoo.com, but the DNS server will remember the IP addresses. And it's done in two parts. So first you set up your DNS server, meaning you have to have a phone and you have to configure the address book. So that's step one. Then the step two, you have to put the phone number in there. At first, you have to manually get your friends' phone numbers, either by them calling you or by you manually typing in your friends' phone numbers. You have to get it into your phone. So that's step two. Let's type it in there. Step two, enter the phone number. So I'm going to type step two, enter the phone numbers. Phone numbers. Then this is step one, which means you have to get a phone first. If you don't have a phone, all bets are off. So this is step one, meaning you have to get a phone, get a phone and configure it and configure the address book. So these two is all you need for DNS. Meaning step one, get your DNS and configure it. Done. Then step two, put in all of the names to IP addresses that you want it to remember, and that's it. So now let's go ahead to the lab and start working on it. So now I will go to the lab 118. Let me scroll down to the lab 118 where the question says what the question says to do. And if you get to lab 118, it's giving us a sample configuration here. So it says for step A, for part A, step 1, it says bind is the DNS server. To install and configure it, start by entering this command here. I'm just going to copy and paste because it's a lot easier for me. So pretty much I'm cheating. No, I cannot copy and paste because I'm using a virtual machine. So bind is like your phone. So if you look at it here, where's my right here. So we're going to put bind here, meaning we're going to put an address book here, and then we're going to configure it to make sure it works. So we're still on the phone side. Phone represents DNS. So now let's go to our machine here and do what it tells us to do. I cannot copy and paste because I'm inside of a machine, so it's not letting me. So now it says to do yum-y install bind and then install bind utils, right? So now it's doing all of this, and because I put a -y in there, it will not come back and ask me questions. It will just go ahead and just start installing. Look at all these packages up here. That's what it's going to install on my machine. First, it cleans up the machine, it resolves the dependencies, and it will go ahead and start installing for me. Let me see if I can make the screen bigger so that we can see what it is doing. And it's done installing, right? Installed bind and then updated the bind utils, and it's done. That was easy, wasn't it? So now this is where I might have to pause the video so I can type all these things in, because it's not going to make a lot of sense for me to have you on watching a video and I'm typing all these options in. So then it says configure your options sections. So you open up the configuration file for bind. It's called name daemon, right? So you vi, you etc name.conf. So you open up the configuration file for bind and you put in all of these options, right? So I'm just going to go and copy and paste this in there and I'll show it to you when I'm done. So let me pause the video and I'll go type all of this in. So first of all, I'm going to look inside inside the name.conf file to see what the defaults are. So I type in the vi etc name.conf to see what the defaults are. And so if we get it to, if we go here, we want it to listen on ports, on all ports, on, so for port 53, what did I just do? All right, for port 53, we want it to listen on for to listen on whatever the IP address is. So we're not going to force it to only listen on localhost. So I will remove this. So I comment that part out. So it's not only listening on localhost, which is 127.0.0.1. I want it to listen whatever the IP address is, just in case my IP address changes, it should still listen. The next line, which is the listen line, is the same for both on both sides. So I will not worry about that. I will just go on to the next line again, which is the directory. The directory is var named, which is fine. That's where it's going to store all of our configurations. So now I will move on to the next line. The dump file, I really don't care so much for where it dumps where it keeps the dump file and the statistics file. They are in a good place, but again, I'm not worried about where it's putting them. So now, um, the mem statistics, I'm not worried about changing it. One thing that the default does not have in my case is this thing called allow transfer. So now it has the allow query. In this case, it says to change the allow query to any. So again, I don't want it to only listen on localhost, and I don't want it to only query for localhost. This means that if you send a query, like in the beginning of the class, I showed you how to query a name server, and then if you send a name to it, it will return the IP address. If you leave it as localhost, it would only answer questions from the localhost. We want it to answer questions from any machine on the network. Actually, what I'm doing here is a little wrong because I'm answering questions from anybody that can ask questions. So it will answer the questions. Now, the next one is the allow transfer, which I was saying that the default does not have. So I'm allowing it to transfer from localhost, and I'm allowing it to transfer from my secondary DNS, which of course I don't have. But I'm going to type in something there anyway, 192.168.0.2. So let's just assume that this is my secondary domain name server. And what I'm configuring is the primary, which is the authoritative, and then the secondary, which is just a next one, a secondary name server. Which I don't have. I'm saying use that. Allow it to work. So now recursion, which is no. This means that if you want a non-authoritative name server, then you leave this as yes. I'm not doing a non-authoritative name server. I'm actually going to be putting my configuration inside here. So I'm going to say no. What this means is that if you imagine that this is your phone, you're actually storing the phone numbers and all the translations you want to do directly inside that phone. You don't want anybody in between doing the work for you. So now the next one over is the DNS sec enable. I say yes. The validation, yes. The auto, yes. Now there are some parts here that are a little different, and I will show you what the difference is. And okay, it's just those two lines at the bottom, and they are different, so I'm going to ignore them for now, and I'm going to save this file. You have seen the changes that we made to the file. I would save the file, and I will get out of the file. So now I have done this step 3 of what the question asks us to do. So I will go to step 4 now. It says now create your first domain. So now it's like we have just bought our phone and we're setting up our phone. Now we need to create a friend's address book. So my two friends, Jane and Kim, I'm going to put them in. I'm going to create a friend's address book so that I can put them in there. So imagine that this is friends, right? I just put a tag here called friends. In my own case, my tag is Linux Java zone. So a zone is like an address book area. So some can be friends, another one can be family, another one can be co-workers, whichever way you want it to be. In my own case, I'm just picking linuxjava.com as my zone, and you can pick whatever you want as your own zone. So now this is an example of the zone that it's giving you up there, just so that you know how to do it. That's just an example. And I will go here, type in O, and I will paste what I have copied from Linux Java zone, and I will copy it down here. And something that's important here that you need to know is where it's keeping the address book. So it's keeping it in a file called linuxjava.com.zone. So it will look inside /var var/named. Remember we told it /var/named up here to keep our files. This is the directory up here, var named. Then when we tell it to store our configuration file, which is our address book, it will now go and store the friend's address book, which is Linux Java in this case. It will now store it in a file called this inside there, inside the var named. So now that's what we need to do on the phone, meaning in the DNS server. And we're done with the DNS server. So I'm going to save and exit. So now we will go to that file, which is the address book now. So if you look at if you're following the big picture of things, first we went and did step 1, which is we got a phone and we configured the address book. Then now we're going to go to the step 2, which is where we add phone numbers. So we have two friends, Jane and Kim. So we just have to say, Jane, here's your phone number. Kim, here's your phone number. We put it into the address book. And that's the step that we are just about to do now. So now we open up this file here, which is the address book. So let me open the file up and then I'll go back to it. So now vi, the file doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to create it. Var named linuxjava.com.zone, right? And this is actually called forward lookup, this particular one that I just created. What does forward lookup mean? Let me just explain that very quickly. This means that if I type in name, give me the IP address. Eventually, we will do the reverse lookup, which is another file, which is if I type in the IP address, then give me the name. So if I don't know my friend's name, but I remember a phone number, I can just type in the phone number and it will tell me who that phone number belongs to. That's the reverse. But the forward is if I type in name, tell me whose number it is. So now let's go and explain that. Let's go and configure that very quickly. So I'm inside here now. I hit enter. So it's inside our file now, var named, and this is the file name. So now I will use this to configure the file, but instead of typing it one after the other, I will just copy and paste because I want to save time. So I will just copy and paste for you. So I will copy from here, Control C, and I will hit I to get in insert mode and paste it here for you. Now I will come back and format this later on, but for now I'm just going to leave it as this. Now the IP address of this machine, I believe, is 11. I'm going to look it up in a second. The IP address of this machine, and I believe it's 116. So now if I wanted to resolve, other, I will come back and put the resolve in there. I'm going to the names that we want to resolve, the configuration will actually go down here. So let me just put it now so you can see it. Even though I don't have the machines, I have to look for the names so that I can put them in here, right? But I don't have the names in my head yet. I have to go and look at the names and then the IP addresses, the names that I want to call my machines and their IP addresses, and then come back and put them in here. So now let me go and take a look at that so that I have it, because I don't have it in my head. All right, so now it says to restart. I'm going to go ahead and restart my server now so we can do the testing. So I went back and fixed one of the errors that I saw in here before. So if we look at the script here, the configuration file, which is pretty much the phone at this point, which is the configuration file for DNS. When I typed this in, I think it was here. In one of these, I forgot to put in the colon at the end, and I think it's this one here. So I put in the colon, and then I went and changed the forward lookup, so which is the Linux Java zone. So if you look inside this directory, I'm inside, let me show you the present working directory. So this is the present working directory var named, which you saw before. And inside there we have this linuxjava.com.zone, which is the forward. Like I said before, there's a forward and there's a reverse. I'm only going to do the forward in this video. So now let's look at the forward. And here I changed around the configuration file a little bit to better suit what we need to do. So now 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's just tidy it up a little bit. So what I did was that I set up the time to leave, the start of authority. My machine here is admin. I put the root for the user, and then on the third line and the fourth line and the fifth line, sixth line, I put the comments on there so you can see what each of them what each of them is doing. And then name server information. So now we have to specify who our name server is. Obviously it is this machine here, and that's the name server. So we don't have to do anything else there. Now the IP address of this name server. Now we put in this name server, we have to put in the IP address so that it knows itself. Now there's a mail exchanger. We don't need to, I'm not going to even talk about that because we don't even need to do this. We're not working with mail in this lab. So now this is one of the important ones here. The host name to IP addresses, the forward lookup. Now this is important, but I'm not going to worry about this because I don't want to explain what this means right now. But it is pretty much the same thing as the one down here, which is this file server here, because this is the only one that we need and that we configured in this in our labs. So that's the one that I'm going to work on right now. So it says the file server internal zone, and this is the A record. A record means, so you're going from, when I say name, when I say give you name is file server, you give me the IP address 192.168.0.120. Now I'm going to change it to, as a matter of fact, you know what, I'm going to comment it out first just so that you can see what happens. So I write and I quit, and then I restart. Let me restart the service. So there was an error when I restarted it. So I'm going to change this. Instead of putting a pound sign, let me put a, hopefully it's happier with this one here. So when I did it before, let me clear this. So when I restart this, oh no, so I want to put restart, not that. So I typed in status instead of restart. So I put in, okay. So now I put in, I restart it. If I wanted to dig, meaning that I'm checking for the domain name, dig at admin, which is this server here, this name called file server. Well, let me put the whole thing so that you can see fileserver.linuxjava.com, because that is what it would look for. And when I do this, okay, as you can see, here's the authority section, right? Here's the question section, file server. Do you see an answer section? No. And do you see the IP address of this file server? No. So now let us fix that problem. So now we add file server in there. Right now I commented it out. Now I will add it back. Let me change this IP address just so you can see. I'm just going to make it 121. You can put any IP address that you want in there. As a matter of fact, let me add another line so that you can see. Let me pick another one of my domain names, EPL ready. So I say EPL ready, and that's how you would add a new machine to the system and give it an IP address to your network 168.0.117, right? Which is the actual IP address in my own case. So then I will restart the service. You always have to restart this service when you change or add a new machine and give it an IP address. So now I can dig, right? I can dig for the file server, right? Watch what happens. What you see? Do you see a difference? Now there's an answer section, right? And included in the answer section is the file server name, the time to live that I gave it to it, if you remember that, and then the IP address. And then who's responding? The machine that's responding is admin, and here's its IP address. And that should conclude our lecture for the DNS. Now, let's just check EPL ready just to show you what happens. And as you can see, 117, which is what I just put in there. And that's what you need to know for this lab here. Now, let's see if there are other things, other parts of the question that we need to see here. So now, after we have done that, it says to restart the service, which we did, and ensure Nameserver starts at boot by doing the check config on. So you just have to put in this command here, and then test your newly configured. We did that. Use any new method of your choice to obtain the IP address of linuxjabba.com. So you just have to either ping it or do ns lookup of linuxjabba.com and you will get the IP address. Configure your name server to resolve rhjabba.com to the IP address of linuxjabba. And in that case, all we have to do is, so I open it here and I go here and I say rhjabba.com in A, and I put in the IP address of linuxjabba here, which I don't have in my head, but I throw it in there, and that will answer that question for us. So now let's go ahead and see if we can complete this lab before it gets too long. All right, to test your configuration, type rhjabba.com into your browser and ensure that linuxjabba.com is displayed. And all you just have to do is open up your browser right here and type in that IP address, that rhjabba.com, and watch the linuxjabba.com appear for you. That brings us to the end of this video. It's already about 28 minutes. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any questions, please send them to me. I will now be sure to answer them for you. My own name is Shounmi Joseph and my email is showpopulos@gmail.com. If you have any questions, please send them to me. Thank you very much.